I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, can I get a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, all those in favor? 7-0. Okay. A motion for the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion second, all approve? 7-0. All right, next up is the Board of Education acknowledgements. First of all, I'd like to mention that there was a donation from Scott Grandin, $2,475 for SOS, serving our students through the Jason Grandin Foundation. And so what that is student meal accounts will get $25 vouchers. So thank you to the Grandin family for that donation. Principals. Anybody want to go?
Hold on, can I
Oh,
stop real quick? I do want to introduce Ben Malik.
oh, yeah.
Ben is our new assistant principal at the middle school, so this is his first one, so we're glad to have him. We can put him on the spot a little bit later, but before we got started, sorry Jeff, but I did want to introduce Ben.
Yeah, Ben's an all right guy. He's worth being interrupted. I appreciate it. Busy time in all of our buildings right now. We have been flooded with a number of requests for new students this year, and that's been a terrific thing for us. So what the net gain looks like for our building as compared to the number of seniors that graduated and freshmen that came in, it could still be a loss, but the idea that there are many people that are requesting even in the last minute to come into our district has been nice. And it keeps our registrar of rights very busy, and it means her and I get to talk on a regular basis as we vet those students at the last minute. Working on in-service this week. One of the things that we did last week was a SWOT exercise where you have a discussion about your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and then things that could threaten the success of students in your classroom. As we did that, it was very reassuring as we worked in small groups and moved around to see that our team was on the same page on so many issues. And so I think that says a lot about the direction and the type of year we're going to have at high school this year. The other thing that I share with our staff, and Mr. Gannon and I will talk with our students about this week at our back to school meetings, is the notion that we hope that we can empower our students to move from a state of reliance to a state of resilience. And so as you become an adult, you have to be more independent and resilient on your own rather than relying on others. So our teachers will hopefully take that to heart, and our students will continue that path with that journey where they can depend more on themselves than on others. So that's all I have.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Activity-wise, we finished up all of our summer stuff, camps and everything. Band camp was last week. They sweated outside in the mornings with the heat, but they were inside during the afternoon, so I'm pretty sure nobody went down or anything like that. It was all good. Starting on Wednesday with freshmen and Thursday with the 10th through seniors, and this is the first time in a long time, including other places I've been, we're starting the year full. Coaches' positions are all full. I have one just assistant position we've got to hire, but that's nice going into the year, not having to worry about coaches down the line. So that's all full. And thank you for approving the shot clocks and the new scoreboard. Vacation meeting last week. They are mandatory. Shot clocks are mandatory postseason this year, and mandatory 4A, 5A, and 6A next year, and then the following year 1, 2, and 3A have to have. So just kind of what we thought, even though the membership said no, we went ahead and Keisha went ahead and passed that. So I think that's about the biggest news that came out of that meeting. So anyway.
So I'm going to piggyback off of Jeff and Darren. So Darren talked about band camp last week, which I talked to Tim about it as well. I told him it is awesome being able to hear the kids out there playing. I mean, I love high school band. It's so cool. It just is awesome to hear them out there, and so they do such a great job. And so just want to let, and if you don't ever think that band kids run, I saw them on the field and they were doing sprints. He had them doing sprints, just so you know. I don't know if anybody ever knew that or not, but yeah, he had them out there running sprints, so that was kind of cool. Anyway, piggyback off Jeff, in-services that we've had have been really, really good. We did the SWAT activity with our staff as well, and then also did it with our teams, and so it was really cool to see kind of what they came up with and what they're good at, and also where they think that are areas for opportunity and growth, and so that was really good. Also today, I don't know if Matt's going to talk about it or not, but we had two other districts with us today at the middle school. And Amy Wright did a fantastic job of getting that organized for everybody, that in-service day. And so it's awesome. We're ready to go. Sixth graders come on Wednesday. We're excited.
So, this is marking 2 weeks now that I've been with the district, and one thing that I just really want to say is how welcoming the environment has been since day one that I came in, especially when I stopped in the building in May. It was just everyone coming up saying hi, and it's just been a very welcoming environment to here at the Paola schools. To piggyback off a few things, activities, we are also at the middle school level having full coaches at the beginning of the year, which is an amazing feat. It's very difficult at times to get coaches, and it's very blessed to have it. Give you guys a little bit of information about myself. I'm an 11-year educator. Last 2 years I spent with the Leavenworth School District as a 6th grade principal at the intermediate school up there after teaching 8 years in Olathe. So I'm very glad to be here with you guys here in Paola, and I want to thank everybody for the warm welcomes.
Thank you. Brennan and Stacy are at back to school night, so we'll move on to Jimmy.
For acknowledgements, you already mentioned the Jason Grandin, so I do want to echo that. Thank Scott Grandin, and SOS went well. Things keep on happening even after the event, so there's resources available. I'll be sharing that out with building staff later about where we can direct people for resources.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Amy, anything?
No, I was just gonna say, I really appreciate the custodial maintenance staff at the middle school helping out and getting everything ready. We hosted 500 people today and it went really, really smooth. And our food service did amazing with lunch, had everybody in and out. In fact, they were almost too fast because we had a very long time. So we weren't expecting it to go that fast. And so they did a really, really good job. So our food service, maintenance, and custodial staff absolutely are to be commended for what they did and what they got prepared today. It was amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. Justin?
You'll notice the consent agenda includes a lot of yellow highlights and 2 pages for employment action. So this is the time of year when things are changing quickly. We hire a lot of people, and we also, you'll see a lot of terminations, resignations, separations, because things happen over the summer and a lot of these are pairs not coming back to the position, and we don't find out till late in the game. So as August starts back up, people get back in buildings, we'll start to see an influx of those there. And so that's been my life. We're over 70 new employees for the 25-26 school year in the district. So that's over 10%, quite a bit over 10%. So it's been busy last month, basically.
One thing I wanted, or actually two things I wanted to say, with the overview that we see of all of the grounds work and upkeep and everything, I think that's something that we should be proud of, the work that has been done, because it does prevent us from using a bond to fix things, and I actually would like to make some of that possibly public, so they can see the work that we do on that. Then the other thing was, for Amy, how did we get selected for the NAEP testing?
We're lucky. It's something that happens about every other year. In fact, I think we did it in 2022 as well.
Okay, yeah, it would be interesting to see how those scores compare with the new state testing.
Yeah, they actually will only give us for the state of Kansas. They won't, because we're not a big enough district, they don't disaggregate that out to our district, but they will give us the state of Kansas results.
Awesome.
We are randomly selected. Randomly, I think, so but we usually get chosen, and so some of our demographics must be something that they're looking at to try to make it a random but it comes through KSD. I would kind of talk a little bit more about today. So we did have Oswami and Lewisburg join us at the middle school, so thank you to the middle school staff. Amy worked extremely hard. This was kind of a team effort for this one because Tammy and I worked on it initially with Dave Tappan, the assistant superintendent of Lewisburg, early. Then as Tammy was leaving, and then Amy came on, I think my comment to her was, congratulations, now this is a project that you get to help with and do, and so she did a really nice job. The gentleman that came and spoke today, Dr. Anthony Muhammad, he's a nationally known, recognized speaker. I mean, he's spoken all over the world, and so that was possible for us to have somebody come in from a grant opportunity through the First Option Bank foundations. The grant, we think of Bayer, but there's other foundations and so forth. So that actually helped pay for him to come in, and that's why we have to. And it's when I say we have to work together on that to get enough people to the other districts, but it also allows our staff to communicate with the other staffs, and it's helpful for everybody, but especially when you have the departments of one. You have one woodshop person, and so they meet the others that they haven't met, and so really good day and a lot of positive feedback. So thank you to Mark and Ben for the use of the building and everything that Amy did.
Awesome. Anybody have anything else? Okay. So next up is the 25-26 budget hearing. So I need a motion first to open the hearing.
So moved.
A second. Motion a second. All those in favor? 7-0. Okay, so this is a time where if anybody who's joining us tonight has comments or questions about the upcoming budget, they can come and ask those now. It's not a discussion that will be had, but Jimmy will be presenting and he can answer those questions. So if there's anybody in the audience that has any questions that they would like addressed? No?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing if nobody.
We have to leave it open. We're gonna
Yeah.
let's leave it open while Jimmy has his presentation. We usually leave it open for that presentation, then we close it afterwards on this one.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. I don't see anybody, Jimmy.
Okay.
Well,
We'll start. All right. So I apologize, like last month I said preliminary doesn't be short. This is kind of the final. So I was asking if I could do this in 30 minutes. I can in 2.5 speeds. So on the replay, you can speed me up and I'll be done in 30 minutes. So I have all the supplies I need. I got water and a pocket full of mints, but we'll get started. So I will just fair warning, I have about 92 slides. I promise I won't spend a minute on each one. We'll be real quick. But as we go through it, I apologize, I'll try not to keep my back to the audience. All this information will be on, all the budget is on the website. It's been in the paper for the legal notice. Everything's out there. My presentation tonight and the budget reviews, which board members, you have a hard copy in front of you, those will be added to board docs tomorrow and the website tomorrow. They are still in progress up until the time of this meeting. So anyway, this will all be out there for tomorrow. But for board members, as I go through, as every year, if you have questions and if it's more convenient, appropriate to stop me on that slide, feel free to interrupt me and ask while we're there, or we can come back to them at the end. So we'll get started. 91 more to go. All right, so this is just the standard list of everything that's on the website and the legal notice that was in the paper. So see, not even a minute on that slide. They're all on the front page. They're under quick links under budget. They're under the news, and then you can also get to them under the business office. So that's the current year. If you go to my business office drop down, we keep the prior year, so there's always 2 years of budget information out there, even though you don't have to do that. And even everything you have out there is more than required, but we put everything out there. So this is a list of everything that's out there. It's kind of on that summary as well. You can see the presentation that we're doing tonight's pending. It will be there. And then the budget review, which is what the presentation really summarizes, will be posted as well. So all those will be out there in their entirety tomorrow and on board docs. Of course, the budget needs to take into consideration the building needs assessment. We do this actually the month before, so it doesn't make this meeting entirely really long. So you already saw the needs assessment information back in June, but it has to be documented in the minutes, so we talked about that, published on the website, and all that is out there, as you see over here. The building needs assessment, state assessment review is out there as a document. There's like 70 pages of information in there. Again, it's got to talk about the barriers and all the budget actions that relate to that. That was covered last month in June before Tammy's retirement. This is just information, and a lot of the headers will have the links, so this will be clickable when that's on the website, and people can go out and read more details on that, but I kind of gave the cliff notes of all the guidance there. Again, just says that we got to talk about the barriers to attaining all the educational levels, which you've heard Amy talk about as well. So the template is kind of standard for every building. It kind of covers these sections, and then this is just the first page of the high school one, so every building has one of these out there. Covers all the different relevant data points. And then this was the overall kind of consolidated summary that was presented in June. Michelle was still president then, so she signed. That's out there on the website as well. This again is just the June part where it was on the board agenda. And these are all the documents that are out there under public content that you can go out and peruse all that information. State assessment review, again, has to be part of the building needs assessment. That was also part of June in the presentation as well. This was the slide, or the title screen of the slideshow that was presented on the assessments and the building needs. And then this was the list of barriers that were identified. That was just one of the slides that I pulled out of there, just to kind of recap. So again, that was back at the June board meeting. Board goals, I think, is always appropriate. These are the goals that are through 2026. There's components that relate to budget, curriculum, so to me, all that kind of ties back into the budget that we talk about. They're of course framed on the wall, and they're in every building in the district, and they're on the website as well too. And now I'm part of this presentation. Okay, so get into some of the nitty-gritty. Some of this is very specific to this year, some of it's general about School Finance 101. So this is general information about the general fund. It's set at 20 mils. Every district in the state, 20 mils. So if there's ever a trivia question, you can't get it wrong. How much is your general fund? 20 mils, because everybody has to be by law. State law sets that, the legislature sets that at 20 mils. All your funds go into general fund and then it's transferred into all the other funds. And the formula, loosely, most simplified version you get is the base state aid per pupil times your enrollment is your general fund. Get some more details on that. Again, the open page of the budget is out there. The whole budget document, all the codes and forms are out there. I try to summarize it, make it a little more simple than the codes, which can be confusing, but once you study them, they're really fairly understandable. But the open page, we have to put a lot of assumptions into the open page. And so Matt and I go through the assumptions every year, and because as board members, you need to know what's in there. You have to put in what you assume your head count's going to be September 20th. None of us can predict the future. We do our best guess of what that's going to be. Then we get audited, things are revised. So again, the budget is setting the legal maximum. You can go down, you can't exceed it. So you have some cushions and things built in there. The number of free lunch students, because that affects your at-risk budget. Vocational hours it comes into the vocational funding, same as bilingual. Transportation, there's a weight in FTE for the state aid on transportation, and then virtual. And then the other assumption that you have to put in, among many, is what your delinquency rate is going to be for your taxpayers. If you don't want to estimate that incorrectly, because if you estimate too low and your delinquency is higher than that, you're not going to collect enough money to fund your budget. So you always have to be aware of that as well. So I know some of these get a little small. Again, you've got the print copy in front of you. A lot of this is in there for history, and I honestly refer to this throughout the whole year. When I need my question, I'll go to my own budget review, because it's a good compilation of historical data. So this is a lot of history of what the base state aid has done. Back from 8-9, that's kind of not really random. I started in 2007, so hence why it started tracking there. That was also when those of you who have been around a while remember in 8-9 the budget downturn and things we had. You could see that there, the red numbers and the negatives. So that was my initiation into school finance. So the total change, and this is what we're talking about for this year, the base state aids went up $237 per student to $56.15. It's about 4.4%. You can see what our general fund is doing and the total change. So this is total change back from 2008. So $1,182 over that, I think 18-year time period. So it's about $66 a year, or about 1.5% if you average it out over that time frame. So I think that's always important perspective to keep in mind as well. The LOB, the local option budget, does not follow this. The general fund's at 5615. The LOB is 5692. That's the difference in how the school finance formula works, and those are probably always going to be different. Future-based aid, those were built in, a lot of things by the legislature. There was a multi-year plan. Future, it's all tied to CPI and basically inflation for future increases. This is just another graphical chart of all the history, clear back to 1992, which was like when the real first formula or the current formula went into existence. So you can see all the history there and the supplemental general, the LOB, and the general fund. So that's from KSD. It's just kind of a different layout of that same information. Again, this I've had in for several years now. I had all the future when we had the multi-year plan. Now we're in the stage that 24, 25, and after, it's all tied to CPI. So that percent is to be determined every year. Again, one of the assumptions that goes into general fund is the enrollment. So you've got the history there of our actual FTE, and even enrollment. You think numbers might be easy. Enrollment, is it audited, is it unaudited, is it head count, is it FTE? There's a lot of different answers to that question. But this is FTE enrollment. And then we put in our projected, which again includes some cushions, because you don't know what that enrollment's going to be, you don't know what your free lunch is going to be. And my goal is always to not have to republish our budget, because it's just unnecessary steps, and I think it adds confusion. So again, this is the maximum. You can go below, you cannot go above without republishing. If you have to republish, it's not the end of the world. It's just one of those things that sometimes you have to do for a multitude of reasons. But the goal is to not have to. So last year, there was a 3-year average provision, if you remember, that was 24-25 only. So now that's gone. So basically, you get to pick between your current year and your prior year enrollment. The average is not an option. And for us, based on what we're projecting, and again, even you'll see here, this is FTE, and then down below, you'll see this number that we're actually using, 1801.6, is different than that 1834. Well, because that excludes virtual students and some other things. It's just a different way of slicing and dicing it. But that is the number that you'll see carried over. This is just kind of every now and then I'll throw in some of the charts and graphs that come with the budget program that it generates in the budget at a glance and some other things, because I think some of them are helpful more than others. So just kind of another way of looking at that if you're more visual. This I've had in since 1920 when KSB put out some information about enrollment. This was statewide, and we've kind of been living this as well here in Paola. You know, what they're saying that total enrollment was going to decline. This is about to the end of that now, of the study that was covered anyway, but I thought the general theme is still appropriate. That they didn't predict noticeable change in the free or reduced lunch, FTEs and things there, but birth rates have declined. We've seen that even in our own community. Paola's aging, maybe birth rates are declining, and that shows some of our enrollment. So again, this was a global thing, but enrollment by grade level has a decrease in lower grades, making a continued decline in enrollment past 24, 25 likely. And we've continued kind of to see that play out in the area. This again is just context information, but the Paola Planning 2050 study that came out, the newspaper covered this story back in 2021, so this is kind of a summary about what they think the population of Paola is going to do between that year and 2050. And it was increasing to about 8,400 residents. So it was almost a 50% population growth, but it was over 30 years, so 1.65% a year. So not significant growth predicted. Again, a lot of it comes down to housing. That was one thing the report said, that there was a need for more affordable housing. I guess you can argue what you mean by how you define affordable. But this, again, was the Hidden Meadows development, that there were a lot of new houses put in there, which we haven't seen in a long time. So I think those still continue to go, are coming on and going up for sale. So hopefully some people with school-age kids will be moving into Paola. This was an enrollment study we had, RSP, so this is just kind of a recap. Back in 2021, we're getting to the end of this study. but I think it's still relevant. You can see kind of what the trends were. We're over here to the end of the study now, so zoom in on that. 25, 26, you can see kind of where they were thinking we kind of have, I guess, plateaued or leveled off, or at least the decline is maybe hopefully to the end. And this was the end of the study, so what we do in the future, if they update that or do something different, but that's been a helpful tool. Again, there's a lot of numbers on here. This is going clear back to 15, 16. This is how the general fund's calculated. So that 1801.6 that I mentioned to you, all the weightings, which I won't go through, comes up with the total weighted FTE times the base state aid. That's your general fund plus the virtual state aid comes up with the total. We can come back to that if you have questions on it. I try to summarize it rather than the codes because those can get a little leaky and confusing and they're broke out by fund, function, and object expenditure categories. But high-level overview, general fund revenue comes from state aid and special ed state aid. So that's the total, 16.7 million. A lot of general fund is salaries, of course. We're a people business. It takes a lot of people to run a school and educate kids. So that's not surprising that you see salaries and benefits being the big category. And transfers out of that. So those go into other funds, which a lot of times pay salary and benefits in those funds too. So you can see those top two, that's 96%. I see I gotta check my math over there. Trying to create some math here. Anyway, 16.7 million, you see kind of the breakdown there. Out of that, the $5.1 million in transfers go into virtual, professional development, special ed, and at-risk. We'll talk more about those in each fund. Assessed value, of course, plays a big part in a lot of budget, including general funds. So this is, again, historical review. You can see all the decreases we had. You can see the recent increases. So back to 2008, we were $133 million. Now we're $266 million. So that is right at 100% or double the amount. Okay? So over 18 years, it's averaged right now, that 18-year period, about 5.5% increase per year. And then you can see the tax delinquency down here. Again, we budget at 4% delinquency. The delinquency, you can see we had a little tick in there a little bit, but it's pretty steady. And that, you'll see later on some things how that impacts the budget. But even KSE at the Budget Works will give you some guidance of the margins above your delinquency. You should have several percentage points above. And so that's the same delinquency we've used for years in this budget. Again, just a graphical representation of the assessed value trend. Again, it's the whole budget presents the prior 2 years actual, and then the 25-26 is all budgeted. Of course, this is assessed value, so that's an actual known number. Other things that show 25-26 are budgeted at this point, not actual. So again, I've said this many, many times, but I think it's always worth repeating, helping hopefully the general public to understand assessed value does impact the school district, just like it affects tax bills, things as well. But with our enrollment growth being kind of stable, when our assessed value goes up and our enrollment does not, we become more wealthy compared to other schools. So the simplistic view, take your assessed value, divide it by the number of students, and you come up with assessed value per pupil. So that determines your state aid. And there's the statute citation, but the essence is for every 1% you're above the average, or every $1,000 above the average, you lose 1% state aid. So you've heard me say that over and over and over. You'll see that again here, how our assessed value is going up and our enrollment, so our relative wealth and our state aid continues to decline.
Hey Jimmy, I'm curious on that real quick. So if our numbers were going up, we wouldn't be losing that money if our enrollment numbers were going up in proportion with our
It would definitely
property
make a difference,
values, right?
because the assessed value per pupil would be less. It also depends on what happens relative to the rest of the state. But yeah, when we're not growing and the assessed value goes up, you're dividing by the same number of students, so our assessed value per pupil relative wealth is going to be higher. So I couldn't say for sure, because it depends on what happens with the rest of the state, but you're exactly right.
But it would be helpful if our numbers were increasing rather than going down.
Yeah. So state aid rates, they're pretty easy to calculate anymore. They're zeros. So capital outlay state aid went to zero. Bonded interest had been 9% back in 23-24. It was zero last year. If we have future bonds, they're going to be zero. So it's real easy math. Other state aid changes, so really we're still getting LOB state aid, but as you can see in this year's budget, it's going from 24% last year down to around 18%. So it's a 6% decrease. In 22-23, we were at 33%. So round that to 34, it's about cut in half. And I've got historical that I've shared in the past about that change every year, and you'll see the projections, I think, on an upcoming slide here. Obviously, that's significant. That's just how the formula works. The legislature controls that. Could it change? Yes. Would it be expensive? Yes. And it would create winners and losers. So is it likely that the state aid formula is going to change? It hasn't changed in a long time. So I'm not saying that's a negative. That's just the fact of how it works. Again, cap outlay zero, bond and interest zero. This, and again, I try to always explain these things to do this to be helpful. But I footnoted here, I used the same LOB budget. You're going to see later a different number, but I didn't want to put in the increase. I'm trying to common size this. So I didn't change the LOB budget from last year just to show the effect of the change of state aid. And again, this is budgeted state aid, not actual. You'll see another slide later. I try to make that a little easier, but it's not overly simplistic even at that. So if we lost 6% of the same, it's about a $300,000 loss of state aid. You'll see later kind of the net number of that. So general fund comparison. Again, I usually typically say make sure you're comparing actual to actual numbers, not budget to actual. So I'm going to violate my own rule of thumb here a little bit because I'm showing you actual, even though I'm putting actual down here, and budget. So last year, actual general fund state aid was $14.5 million. This is the budget for this year of $16.7. So the budgeted general fund last year was 15.7, now 16.7. So you can see here's the state aid increase. That's, again, budget over budget, not budget versus actual like this slide shows. But then the yellow, that's actual, and that was the budgeted state aid. So you can see there was a $300,000 difference between budgeted and what we actually received. That's why I think it's important to note. Again, this sets the maximum. The state aid can go down, but if you estimated too low, it was higher, you'd have to republish. So we try not to.
That's based off of the number that you had in that slide before. That's about 100 before, 100 more students than the prior year, right?
Something like that, yes, because we take the actual, and then I have actually 50 students built in as a cushion. So, yeah, when we get our legal max back from the state, which there's multiple versions of that, we get the unaudited that will turn in September 20th, and we get the audited, and we get the final. There's multiple versions. But yes, it's going to come down, and so is special ed state aid, because that's an inflated number as well, in case the categorical aid would increase. You don't want to have to republish for that. So you have 50 plus whatever it could be. This, again, I had showed you before in previous board reports and back in the July. So KSDE had estimated our general fund increase, and then the LOB goes up 33% of that. So it was about a $495,000 increase for this coming year that we're in now. That's that state aid number that I showed before. Again, assuming a constant LOB, which is not the reality, but just to kind of give you the illustration of that. So the net of that. But again, if you just stop there, this is kind of projection. This was the actual increase, $495. This, again, as I note, partial list of the increasing costs for this fiscal year that we're in. So again, this is the revenue, this is the expense. So even if you stop here, revenue at $500,000, our expenses are going up at least $1.1 million. So 2 times the revenue. So not even going down to this number, stopping at the $500,000. So of that $1.1 million, these are the big rocks. So salary and benefits, again, mentioned we have a lot of staff. That's what it takes to educate kids. So our raise for next year is about a 4% package plus benefits. That's pretty typical, I would say. So it's not like that's an exorbitant, but still $648,000 for that 4%. Our special ed assessment to the co-op is going up almost $300,000 next year. That's significant in our budget. When special ed is already not fully funded, that's another $300,000 in the wrong direction. We'll talk more about special ed later. That's due to rising costs, programming costs specific to our district. And it is money that we owe and that we obviously have to pay for our share of services that our students need and receive. The bus contract has an automatic 3% built into that contract. And then kind of some LOB things and other things. You saw the property insurance renewal rates back in June. You saw the work comp, that was $90,000, so $150,000 for everything else in that $4-ish million is really probably still a pretty conservative number. So again, 2 to 1. So how are we funding this? This is the revenue, this is the expense. You'll see more when we talk about cash balances and some other things in the future. But obviously, you can't keep that up forever. We can't be revenue neutral and be spending more than we're taking in. Each fund walk through, it's kind of standard format, so you'll see 25 actual, and then the budget, and then the proposed budget. The difference is between budget to budget, so again, go back comparing just budget to budget, dollar difference and percent difference. And then there'll be some hyperlinks in there if people really want to learn more about the specific funds and things. So again, LOB has a balance in there. We'll talk a little more about that. The mill levy this year, 14.3 mills, is a slight mill increase in LOB. We'll see some more details on it at the moment. This is just the summary of the LOB, the revenue, which is the carryover balance, which again, part of where that comes from is because we budget a 4% delinquency, it's less than that. So we don't get to just spend the money, it carries over in the next year and it reduces the mill levy. So that 10% is the carryover, and that had a pretty good increase last year. But it's factored into this, so it is a mill levy savings in this budget year of that $500,000. The local and then the state aid on the local option budget. As I showed you before, that would have been like 1.2 million before. And then again, transfers out of that, transportation comes out of that, electricity, some maintenance salaries, that's the only salary really in LOB. Everything else is just operational and building maintenance things. Cleaning, water, technology, textbooks, and I kind of lumped everything else together so this didn't get to be 3 miles long. And then the transfers out of that fund into the other funds.
I have a question on electricity. Are we expecting the 9% bump in our utility rates through Evergy here, or does it stop a little bit north of us?
I have some information, and then I've got to think about what it was. I don't think we're expecting that much.
Okay.
I can't remember on the rate case. I know I had asked that, and then what I'm thinking about, there was a gas case too, I think, too. So no, I don't think so, but do you remember off the top of my head what I shared?
But I don't.
I'd have to get back to that. I don't think it's that
With
much.
more metro area that got
Right.
hit on that,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And again, we were doing that Evergy Business Demand Response Program where we curtail on the high event days and gets, one, there's an incentive to that, but then two, we're using less electricity, so. But it is, I don't know if I can go back to that. I mean, did I break that down? Yeah, I mean, $700,000 is a significant amount of money. That was the one thing that I think was surprising to me is how expensive the light bill is at the high school. It's a big building. But really, when you take that and divide it by the square footage of your house, it pretty much is the multiple. If it's 30 times bigger than your house, it's 30 times more than your monthly bill. I did that my first year here because I'm like, this can't be right. It is. It's just, it's a big building. It takes a lot to heat and cool. Okay, where was I? Have I talked about that slide yet?
Yes.
So just a comparison of the two, same like I do on general fund. So again, I try to show the state aid decrease, the LOB increase, try to make that simplistic even though it's still a little bit complicated. This is a repeat of that same slide. Again, I think it's important to know as we're talking state aid and things. So again, nothing new there. Funding expenses, again, with that revenue not being enough to cover the expenses and with us being revenue neutral, fund balances might have to be used for that. They could decline. You can only spend cash once. It's like your personal savings. If you're running short one month, you take it out of your savings. You can't do that over and over and over. You can as long as you have a balance there. But we're at the maximum for operating funds. Our general fund's based on the enrollment. We can't really do much about that. The LOB, we're at 33%. We can't go higher than that. Even if taxpayers said we'd pay more, you legally can't do that. Same with capital outlay. Your 8 mills were capped. Bond and interest, our last 2 bond issues weren't successful. We're going to talk a little bit about bond. We're paying those off. Bond's not an option unless we run an additional bond. And then on top of that, there was an influx of federal dollars during the pandemic. Those were all fully expended and ended. And so revenue and expenses have to reconcile. We have to get back to the point we can't continue that running a deficit. Board members have been here a while, you remember this. This was a fun little activity, at least I thought it was fun. hopefully not a trademark violation, but I've got a, who owns Monopoly? They haven't called me yet, but Budgetopoly, if you remember this. So it's still valid. This was clear back in 2019 we did this, but we had these cards, you know, the red were kind of the expenses, the green were sources, you know, if we got state aid increases, the cash balances, wild cards of things like health insurance and audit exceptions and things. Basically, that's when you get the max and your FTEs and things. So I always think the theme of that is still good to remember. The other thing as we talk about budgets and how we're funding things, cash balances are important. And it's like expenditure per pupil. You'll see I have this on the next slide. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. But just like expenditure per pupil, you have to know what is in those numbers. We are self-insured for health insurance. So we have a reserve that's over $1 million. We can't spend that for district operating. It's for health insurance. So you have to know why. But there was a legislative post-audit study that we were selected to participate in back in November 2020. And it was really, honestly, a good process to go through. But you can see of all the schools that were a part of it, you know, the green, this was the 100%, what they said was best practice minimum, and where we were, and we had actual report of the percent. I think that's like 105 or 10 for us. But you can see some were way below the red. They were saying you didn't have enough cash, you know, or maybe on the other side, maybe too much. But again, you can't just, to me, look at a static number. You've got to know why. Are they saving up to not to do a bond, or what's the reason? Or, you know, down here, I don't know. But the point is, we were right in the middle of the road. So we do have some reserves and balances, maybe slightly above, but that to me was a good validation. In the budget, so again, that's a little dated now, but it has the last 2 years' actual balances by fund, and then the projected balance for this budget year. And this is a long document, so this is actually the part below the line. These are district, which again, not all ours, so you gotta keep in mind, especially co-op, parents, teachers, some of those things we'll talk about. Not all our money and not all cash that can be spent for operational things. So you gotta really know what's behind the numbers. This part is the rec commission, so that money flows through us, and there are limits. What budget we publish, we can pay them, and if we collect more, and we had some balances at the end of the year that then we paid in the next fiscal year. So this last year was $1,185. When you have a new fund, sometimes that can happen. You don't have any cushion or anything, and if you're, again, budgeting 4% delinquency and it's not, you're going to collect more than you budgeted, so we paid them out in the next fiscal year. Pretty normal. Again, just to zoom in of the percentages that they calculate, and you can see kind of consistent. Again, we could spend hours talking about cash balances and things, but we'll try not to do that. Graphical representation. Again, this is what I alluded to earlier. It's like expenditure per pupil. You have to know what I say, the story behind the numbers. What is it for? What can you use for operating? What can you use for capital? And again, you got to keep in mind where you're at. What's your enrollment doing? We're at the maximum on everything. And again, the deficit, you can see what we're spending in a little bit this year potentially. Okay, all other funds. I used to go through these years ago, one by one, but it really got really lengthy. So this is kind of a summary. So I highlight some, and then the ones in blue, as you can see at the top, are levied funds. So, you know, the federal, I just highlight that because there's been a lot of discussion about that. There was some money frozen, it's been released, hopefully should be okay. You see not a lot of change there. The adult ed program, as everyone's aware, that grant went away. And so where we had a budget last year, we don't have that program anymore. This supplemental, that's also the reason it's declining. That will ultimately pay out. It'll take them some time to wind that down and spend that out. This is Fund 12. So the next year, they'll still be able to do some supporting things kind of in the transition. Virtual is identical. Capital outlay, a lot of that has to do with balances and the timing of when we spend money. And at the end of the year, we publish high enough to spend it. Because if there was an emergency, a catastrophe in a building, even if you have the cash, but you haven't published the budget, you can't even spend your own cash, even though it's prior been levied and taxed and sitting in the fund, you couldn't spend it. So that is why sometimes that gets to be a higher budget. Still 8 mils like it was before. Really, that's kind of all that. This is page 2. We have a lot of funds, so it gets pretty lengthy. But you can see those in there. KFIRS is the flow through. Some of these funds, again, you don't budget for, or you don't report. You only report actual expenditures, you don't budget, and that's why there's zeros. Again, the levied funds, bond and interest, special assessment, we don't levy anymore, but we publish a budget in case we would get an assessment, we could spend that $26,000. If that was a zero and we got an assessment for something, we couldn't pay it.
Bond and interest, I want to highlight that. Again, last year 2.1 million, you'll see this year 4.4 million. The mill levy is $0. This is, again, like I said, only so we can pay those bonds off. We have to have a published budget. That is the payoff, you'll see in a minute, plus the interest that we're going to pay off in September. And then the special ed co-op. At risk is again based on our free lunch students. We estimated at 650. Last year we built the budget on 610. The actual budget was 591. So again, there's cushion in there so that we don't know what that number is going to be. And you don't want to, or at least I don't want to have to republish. Not necessarily a tax implication, but it's a budget authority implication. Graphical representation, you can see kind of the ebb and the flow of free lunch students. Again, this is projected. This is not, the rest are actuals. Special ed, again, we've talked about the thing I always point out about special ed, it's funded differently. General fund is based on students, special ed is funded based on staff and categorical aid, so much per teacher and per para, and that's listed in there. A change a couple years ago was that local contribution, some additional funding, and so that, I kind of walked through that as well. If there's questions, we can talk about that. This is the change for next year. There was $10 million put into special ed. It's really a net of $7.5 million. This is a slide from the budget workshop that the state puts on, KSDE, because some federal funds expired, didn't continue. So only $10 million was put in, not really keeping up with the increase of special ed expenses. Take that $2.5 million off, it's really $7.5 million for the whole state. Health insurance, again, we're self-insured. So you can see for 2 years, we were fully insured with Blue Cross. We're back to self-insured, so we have a stop loss. We pay the first $120,000 of claims for anybody on our health insurance plan. Hence the reason we have a reserve and stop loss to pay out those things. There's details in there. Bond and interest, again, the zeros. We're not getting state aid. We haven't for 2 years now. This is the outstanding debt. You can see how that's been declining rapidly. We're at $4.3 million. We'll pay that off, plus the interest will be the $4.4 million. And you can see down here in the fine print, hopefully you can see that our mill levy is zero. So we're not levying anything this year. This is just the budget to be able to pay the bonds off, which will happen September 1st. Again, just a chart showing the pay down of the debt. They were scheduled to pay off in 2028. We're going to pay them off this year. These are the balances. And again, we'll get them paid off September 1st. We approved that a couple months ago. That legal notice we have to do for the bondholders, telling them we're prepaying, and you have to work all that with the state treasurer's office. So that will be coming out soon. So you'll notice that in the financials when we pay that $4 million out. We're going to see balances fall. Okay, again, things that we talked about. These are things that we currently levy. Bond and interest, of course, we're not levying anymore. So we used to have 4 levied funds. Now we're going to have 3. The Rec Commission flows through us. They are separate from us. They have their own board. They have their own budget hearing. They've already done that. They do their own publication. But it flows through us. So just like those other things, we collect it. They use the school district's tax base. And then we collect the money and we turn around and pay them 100% up to our budget limit, like that one slide showed. And then if there's anything else, it goes in the next year. So that's just a flow through. But again, that was voter approved. So that's technically on our levy sheet. Things we don't levy, we talked about in the past. We, of course, don't have an adult ed program anymore, so that's not an option. Cost of living is in play right now. We'll talk a little more about that in the future for the November election. Special assessment, we levied in the past. We haven't, and that's usually not a very big one anyway. There's others in there, but really they're not very common. And schools, I think it's always important to note we can't levy sales tax. So what we have is what we have. The Rec Commission can go up to 4 mills by statute. Any Rec Commission can do that. So again, any of those things could have been done this budget year because of the bond paying off and still been revenue neutral, which we are revenue neutral. So cost of living, as I mentioned, that the board passed a resolution. It was protested. It will be on the ballot in November. So again, this is just a summary, and I put some slides with headers so people can go out there and look at cost of living to inform themselves about what the issue. Again, I'll say, like I've said a lot of times already, we don't pick the name. We don't get to choose the name. It's very, maybe not the most descriptive, but that's the statutory name of the fund. And we'll talk about why that's named that. But basically, you're eligible to a percentage. You can see it changes every year. We have to have the voter election and be eligible to be able to levy it. And you can see it varies. A couple years ago, we weren't eligible and it wasn't very much. But it has to do with the cost of housing in your community, kind of the assessed value that we've talked about. So this year, we could have levied 2.7% of the general fund. So you just take that $16 million number times 2.7%, and it would have been $450,000. We can't do that because of the protest. We have to have the election first. If we were levying it, it would have added 1.7 mils to the levy. So you'll see that later when you see the net decline of our district mill levy. You'll see what that could have been. Again, just to recap, what would cost of living do for us? $500,000 increased budget, $1 million increased cost. That is right about the number that would fill the hole. So that would be a revenue source for the district. This is the ballot language. This will be in the newspaper coming up soon, the legal notices of that. But this is what the ballot is going to look like when people go in to vote. And all the polling places will be open. That'll be part of the notice I didn't put in here. But again, it just says, shall the Payable School District, I'm going to summarize a little bit, be allowed to levy an ad valorem tax to finance the cost attributable directly to the cost of living waiting to the enrollment of the district. So a vote in favor is yes, a vote opposed is no. This was for 23-24. We've been talking about this for several years now. This was talking about the assessed value, median home value of the state of Kansas. So of course Johnson County was top, but we were number 4. There's the source in there, this biggest US cities. They haven't updated that, or at least I couldn't find it, but just do a Google search and you can find others. So obviously Johnson County is still one of the high, probably the high water mark. But here it says several other counties have median home value, high home values, including Miami County, top of that list. So that's the reason we're eligible. We do host a special ed cooperative. Again, this is a summary of that. It adds about $20 million to our budget. That's significant over round number 2,000 students. So that inflates that expenditure per pupil by a significant amount of money. Total expenditures of the budget. So again, you've got all the details in the budget review, which will also be posted online. But this published budget, total all funds, everything this year, $71.4 million. It was $66.3 million. And again, what we actually spent was $56 million. So I net out the difference there. There's transfers in there. So again, it's authority. It's not really a $5 million, 7% increase, but that's the authority. You gotta really go through all the numbers, but that's the Cliff Note total sum of everything. Mill levy comparison. So what we are projecting for this year, 20 mills for general fund. Again, every district has to do that. So that's what I said, your trivia, you can always be right. It's how much is your general fund? 20 mills. LOB, 14.3 million, capital outlay 8, bond and interest 0, because we're paying that off. So those, based on assessed value increases, this is the change. Those are positive increases. Again, I try to note over here some of those projections and things to keep in mind, the loss of state aid that we're losing on LOB. So yes, assessed value is going to generate more, but we're losing it on the back end for state aid. Bond and interest, we're paying off, so we're not levying anything this year, $0 to be levied. So that's a $1.4 million decrease in taxes. So we are going to be about 42.3 mils. That's a 5.6 mil decrease from last year. And so, again, that net total down about $884,000 decrease in taxes. So my footnote here says that if we weren't losing the state aid, then obviously that wouldn't have even, it could have gone down even more. Because that shift, the assessed value per pupil, when they say that your relative wealth is increased, it means your community is more wealthy in the definition, and so they pay a bigger share and the state pays a lower share. That's the state aid. Again, changes of that would be expensive and create winners and losers, so probably not likely, just to understand why we're losing state aid.
I have a question on that one. So, I mean, I did email you questions on it earlier, but to specify, when we voted on revenue neutral last month, I guess I was foolishly under the assumption that every line item would be revenue neutral. And then when the notice came in, it was almost like we weren't actually being transparent with the taxpayer, which is what the intent of that legislation was transparency. I'm not saying we necessarily, the directive on that was not necessarily, it was not, the blame does not go on you or the superintendent, it's just a question, especially with the rec being part of our budget and clearly also on that line item going above revenue neutral, granted it was only $400, it's still above. My fear is if a complaint went into VODA and VODA ruled with the person who was complaining, that could potentially cause us to give $100,000 back to taxpayers and the rec to give $400 back to the taxpayers. So I just want to say that I am extremely cautious of it because the Baldwin City, Baldwin School District had a similar issue. So.
Yeah, and I will say, just looks like I responded back to that email
Yeah.
as well. You know, that is why we send all of our information to KSDE, we go there for the budget review. And really, so the state sets the definition, and in my preliminary, not in this, but if you remember that code 99 where I showed that breakdown. So it kind of looks at a multitude of different ways, and you have to meet the test. But the be all end all, and the reason why we work so closely with the Miami County Clerk, is the county clerk is the rule on that. It's not anybody at the state, it's not anybody at the district, it's your county clerk. And obviously every county has a different clerk, people might interpret things differently, but that's why we always send, just like the preliminary, I send everything to them, it used to be Janet White, Council White up, and say, here's what we think, but they have to say that yes, it meets revenue neutral. And they have said that it is revenue neutral. Now I will say, it does get confusing because of all the different funds, because if you do look at them line by line, you can have increase, like general fund. And there's actually, it's written in the law, that if that's the only reason you exceed, then you are revenue neutral. Because again, like I said earlier, you can't not, if that revenue neutral rate, which already is 18 something, I think, you can't do that. I mean, you can, but you'd be guilty of violating state law. And I don't think anybody wants to do that and have those ramifications.
I think if there was a separate box just for the school district, instead of all of it together, and then the bottom would show that it was revenue neutral based on that. So because you can't actually separate, you have to have them separated because they have a different tax base.
Right.
So it's just the transparency to the taxpayer is what is kind of lacking on that, but we are still, I will agree that we are still below the budget from the year before, so.
And I will say, again, it's not pay the school district, but just in general, I think those notices, they're different. Like I have Franklin County property. That notice is different than the Miami. There's no consistency, which makes it hard to me. If it was a standard thing and everybody did the same, it'd be much like the budget document. It's standard. Every school district does the same thing. So those are different. And you'll notice, and we're going to get to the taxpayer notices here in a minute, so I'll point some of that out there. But on that, schools are listed differently than cities and counties. And why? You know, again, probably some backstory on that legislatively, but you'll see that. It's different even in how entities are listed on that form. We're listed 3-4 times, others are listed once.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, yeah.
It needs clarified on part of that, but yeah.
I think there could be some simplification.
Yes.
So. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Mill rate, again, we used to have the 4 levied funds, now we only have 3 because bond and interest paying off. So it's general fund, capital outlay, LOB. I talked a lot about taxes in July, I won't rehash all that. The July presentation's out there as well. Again, our mill rate, again, they continue to decline. This is where we're projecting this year, 42.3 mills. You can see the 3-year look back. This is a longer look back. You can see all the decreases. This year was a 0.13 increase. And you can see the tax changes as well, and including this year. So again, that's kind of like what the revenue neutral is a little bit looking at too, is that year over year. So again, I shared this before. This was last year. We were, every one of these schools, even though a lot of times you may not realize it, have a piece of territory in Miami County. Sometimes you may not think about it, but Blue Valley touches, Spring Hill, Gardner, all of them. Clear down to Prairie View. So all this is summarized. It's out on the Miami County Clerk's website. All entities you can see from cities and counties and school districts, rec commissions, extension districts, libraries, all their mill rates. And so I just kind of take out all the extraneous information and just show the mills. So we were third lowest in Miami County 2 budget years ago. Last year, because our mill levy dropped, and so we ended up down lower than Lewisburg. So the only district that was lower than us was Prairie View. And if you remember from before the slide I just showed, this year we're projecting our mill levy at 42.3 and some odd mills. So depending on what happens with Prairie View, we more than likely are going to be the lowest mill levy of any school district in Miami County. And you've heard me say this before, Prairie View has a little power plant down there. So even though district-wise, size-wise, their assessed value is very comparable to ours because that power plant has a huge assessed value. So for us to be below them, and I know they were going to be, I think, fairly flat. I don't know where they are because different people are in the different process. I'd say we're probably pretty early in the budget process and people aren't having their hearings. But once all the final are out, you'll see the actual, and we'll do a mill levy report, and I will be sure to let you know that. But we are going to be right at the bottom, if not the lowest. So I think that speaks volumes for our taxpayers. Again, this I shared last month. This was state information. This is a long spreadsheet that I snipped the headers off. I mean, it is long, a lot of columns. So this is just kind of like the state averages of all those different funds, just if you want to go back and compare. Again, general fund, 20 mils is the average because everybody has to do 20 mils. Our LOE is around 14, 18 and a half is the state, and you see bond and interest all the way around. So again, our bond and interest is going to be 0. So this again is last year data, because everybody's publishing now. That won't come out till later, till everybody gets their budgets done and certified. But that was the state average, was 53 mils. Again, we're 43 mils. So the lowest was Fort Leavenworth. Very interesting because it's small and there's not a lot of property there. So that's kind of interesting. That's, if you remember how they affected the bond state aid a lot. The highest mill rate is another small district. We were 223rd out of 286 by total mill levy. So we were 172nd rank. But again, and this is a little bit of a projection because we won't know what everybody's mill levy is, but our proposed mill levy, if we would have had that mill levy last year, and again, we don't know what everybody's going to do, but we will run, when this is available, we'll rerun this. But if we had the 43 mills last year that we're going to have this year, we would have been 268th lowest out of 286. So only 18 school districts would have had a lower mill levy than Payable School District. So there aren't a lot of people, only 18 others say they have a lower mill levy than ours. So I think that's key. Is that good or bad? How we're going to maintain our facilities and things. But that shows the burden for our local taxpayers is lower than most all the state. So I think that's important. The other thing that I always talk a lot about, expenditure per pupil, and you won't have to hear my whole song and dance this year. Oops. Maybe that's my sign. Because it's not available. So I went to pull up the 24-25 data to update, and it's not available right now. When it is, I'll update it. So I put in red. This is just documentation showing, because I use the data warehouse, it's out there publicly that anybody can do this, but it's not there yet. So this is a repeat. So I put bold at the top. Of all the things that we do unique here, again, the adult ed consortium ended, but during this time period, we still had it, and would have had it last year. Parents and teachers, special ed, Carl Perkins used to be a bigger deal, it's not so much anymore. But we had the 34th largest budget in the state of Kansas out of 286 districts. Again, low mill levy, big budget. Part of mostly this co-op being $20+ million runs in, but it inflates our per pupil expenditure. Again, not a tax burden, but good to keep that in mind and know what that's at. So that's what we were. And then I always net out all those things, the unique things in payroll. So where we're spending $32,000 a student, there's almost $12,000 that are all those extra things. And as I footnote, part of those would be ours anyway. Part of this parents and teachers is us. Part of the special ed is us. Part of adult ed was us. Part of Lake Mary is us. But it's also a lot of other districts as well. So you can see where our ranking went from, let's see, that was total expenditures, down to 192nd net per FTE if you factor that out. So the 32,000, you're 24th, that's not very good. But taking all those things out gets it more down in line with the state average and things. So again, that's dated information because it always lags a year behind and it's not available for the year behind, so this is 2 years behind. This is current, back to current, expenditure by function. Again, instructional spending is kind of a marker that people look at where it's 70%. That's kind of what you would expect. It again depends on what is happening inside your budget, inside your district, but that is a good number there. This is another little snippet from the budget at a glance about revenue. Everybody always wants to know state, local, and federal. That's the 3 components of our budget. Again, this is my red added, that's not on the form, but actual budget. So you want to keep that in mind, but that revenue per pupil, again, it includes that 20 million from the co-op that flows in. All the co-op assessments from other districts, their state aid, that's all in this local revenue. So I always like to point that out. Local revenue does not just mean ad valorem tax revenue. That's other assessments and things when people pay us for their parents and teachers, special ed, other things. Notice the hearing, this is what was in the newspaper. Says that we're having a hearing tonight. Shows the mill levies and the projected taxes. Again, the assessed value is down at the bottom. It's worth a lot of money because Amanda and I both signed it. And then we mailed copies to everybody through the newspaper. This, back to the question we talked about, the discussion we had earlier about the taxpayer notices. This was a slide from KSD from the budget workshop, that they made changes legislatively to those notices this year to include these columns of different things, and then not including some other things. So they did change. Are they still perfect? Yeah, I think they're far from it, and they're not uniform from county to county. But maybe someday, I'm sure that's going to continue to be evolving. So even the notice is big. So this is an actual notice that I've edited out the specific information to the property, but left the things that applied. So what I went through is if there was a dollar amount that was unique to that property, I changed it to zeros. Percents and things are probably uniform, and this amount of revenue from property tax is uniform. This is that new column, difference or change in revenue. And if you look down, and I know this, I'll zoom in here on another slide, but you can see there's only one negative number on that. And guess who it is? It's us. So that, and we're listed again, like I mentioned, 3 times down here where others are listed 1. So we can talk about all the reasons why of that. But this is with our bonds paying off, that's a negative of $1 million. So it's a definite big decrease in taxes, hence why we're revenue neutral. This is really the front page, almost seems like the back page, but of all the hearing notices, state of Kansas is exempt, so they don't ever have a hearing. That's the whole legislative process. The county is exceeding revenue neutral. The city is exceeding revenue neutral, so there are their hearing dates that they will have public comments and people can go and they'll have to have a revenue neutral hearing and a budget hearing. We don't have to do revenue neutral hearing because we're not exceeding. The others, the Extension District and the Rec Commission met the definition of revenue neutral, so they did not have to have the hearing. And we're again listed 3 times. We were revenue neutral, so we're listed 3 times of no hearing required. If we were, then we would have the hearing date, and it would have had to be later because this taxpayer notice, that's how we were able to have our meetings so early compared to others. If they're exceeding revenue neutral, you have to be in that window once the taxpayer notices go out, which should be hitting mailboxes if they have not already. Let's see, that was just, again, the top section of that. Again, a little bit more zoomed in. So again, just to emphasize, if you look down that, you can see where the increases are coming for your tax bill and the overall percentage. But if you look at the Paola School District, and again, the numbers that I shared earlier, you'll see that we are reducing quite significantly with our bonds paying off. So, I don't know how long I've been talking, but probably more than 30 minutes. So this is the point that we will be for action. So we can answer questions, have discussion, but we will be approving the budget tonight. Again, this is in the minutes, the consideration of the building needs and state assessment scores. The Code 1 and Code 99 are in front of Amanda. She and I signed the final. The budget certification is this snippet here that the superintendent always has to sign, so Matt gets to sign that. Just kind of lets everybody know that we did the process and that everything was approved. And then later, another action item, you have to adopt an LOB resolution every year. Even though we already had the election, we told them what our percent was going to be, it's published that way, you still have to adopt the resolution. So that'll be another action item. So, questions?
on that previous slide you were on, where it showed, where you were showing kind of where the taxes were increasing versus where USD 368 has decreased. There's one general and then one capital outlay, and that the one that just says USD 368.
Right.
I know that the bond came out of that, but what else does that, what budget does that go into?
That, on the forms from the county, is called all other funds. And so again, like I mentioned, we used to have 4 levied funds, so general fund is separate, capital outlay. That was bond and interest and LOE.
Okay,
So now it is only LOE.
okay,
Even though they don't label it, it technically is all other funds.
okay.
So all those things, if we have cost of living, that would be in there. If we had adult ed, which we're no longer eligible for, that would have been in there, but it's all other.
Okay.
So that's the breakdown, is general, capital outlay, all other, which is anything else. So for us, it's only LOE in this.
Okay.
It's interesting that the bond line is not in there. I mean, it's not in there because we don't have it, but Miami County combines those two. Because not everybody does.
And that's some of the inconsistencies. School districts get listed multiple times, but then also from, like, I believe Franklin County, the one, it lists general, LOB, capital outlay, bond, all separate. Some of them will have, like, capital outlay and LOB are together, bond and interest is separate, and so they have what each of those lines are isn't consistent from county to county, which then makes it hard when people try to compare.
Yeah. I think if we had capital outlay and LOB on the same line item, it would be a completely different scenario when it comes to the revenue neutral, because it would appear more transparent that we were being revenue neutral. But
Right.
having them on separate line items makes it appear as if we're not. So it's.
And I think that's where the state can get better. The municipalities have tightened it up, just like Jimmy said, our program that we use, is consistent. So you can look at any district. If the municipalities would look at, hey, this is what the revenue neutral is gonna look like for school districts, counties, and so forth. Because that gets confusing for the citizens.
Yeah, it really does. And I think one of the biggest issues is right now the counties have different softwares. So I think that's what's holding up.
Absolutely,
Yeah, so.
absolutely.
And I think something to keep in mind too is all this is projected. People can still, I don't know the whole timing of appraisal challenges and things, but the assessed value numbers are fluid. They're not set in stone. We'll get final later on. So what we publish now versus next year, even the mill levy, we have a collection that we'll have to do later in the spring, I think it's after the first of the year. And we have to tell what the actual was once they get the final numbers, and then they tell us what it was. It's not abnormal for those numbers to vary 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. So, you mentioned like the rec commission where they show $400. Revenue neutral, if you took it in its purest form, would be $0. Well, they're 0.14%, and whether nil, finalists, even if they were 0, with the finals, it could end up more or less. That changes a little
I think
bit.
my concern is more of adopting that as revenue neutral versus what the assessments could cause it to fluctuate.
And I will say one thing too, talking about consistency and things, I have said, and I've asked the county, and this is gonna be worked on for future, I have asked and requested that, the recreation name be changed. It says USD 368 Recreation. If you go to their website, their board, their financials, they are the Payola Recreation Commission, and that's what their minutes are, that's what their legal notice was. It's this because they use our tax base, so I understand that. But I don't want that getting confused as USD 368, because that's in the name. And USD 368 to me means nothing more than the school district.
Yeah.
If it's Payola Rec, that just means they're located in Payola, Kansas. Doesn't mean it's a city program, it means where they're geographically located. So I've asked for that to be clarified for the future, because again, it's kind of that consistency, transparency. I don't want people getting confused. It does flow through our budget, which complicates it, but
Yeah,
that will not change. But I think the name should be updated.
or at least slash payroll, both get blamed.
Yeah. We'll just call it recreation. I don't care. Other questions? I have a question slide, just so you know. Well,
Anybody
got a
have,
few more things on the action too.
okay, comments, questions?
You did a great job presenting it and putting it together, Jimmy.
Yes, thank you very much.
I know it's a lot, but I think it's helpful for everybody to hear it, and hopefully it's informative.
After hearing it, is there anybody in the audience that has a question that they might want answered for Jimmy before we close the hearing? Okay. If there's no other comments or questions, I need a motion to close the budget hearing.
I motion to close the budget hearing.
Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor? 7-0. Okay. Thank you, Jimmy.
You welcome.
All right, next up, information items. Just a reminder to the board, we have a special meeting on the 19th from 8 to 9 at Cottonwood.
Yep, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, and to be respectful of your time, we will be done at 9.
Okay. Next, action items. We're gonna move on to approving the 25-26 budget with consideration of building needs and state assessment results when they come in.
There's
Anything?
I don't have anything more to add.
Okay.
I'm hoarse, so. But happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions from the board?
I think, with the, are we moving on to the budget?
Yeah.
I think my concern is if there is a complaint about it. Other than that, I don't, and it's not a blame on Jimmy or Matt, I think that the clarification, it makes me uneasy. And if we would be prepared, my question is, would we be prepared to pay back $100,000 if needed, if Boda did have a complaint?
I mean, obviously, if it came to that and they tell us to, then yeah, we're gonna have to do it. We would comply. Absolutely.
What clarification are you talking about? Like, what more is?
The Board of Tax Appeals, because there've been a couple of complaints that have gone in and they've sided with the taxpayer.
Sure.
If they say that the way that we put the notice out was, if they say it was correct, then we wouldn't owe any money, but if they say it was incorrect, whether it came to the rec or the local option budget, which was the line item that had no name next to it there, or no, the capital outlay. Yeah, it could cause us to force our budget to go revenue neutral on that line item. So if you're looking at it from an accounting perspective, those are line items, they should have their own revenue neutral part. But if you're looking at it as whether or not it's a taxing subdivision, that makes it different too. So it's complicated with the notices. That's my only concern is that
So it's, because I have my property information sheet in front of me. But are you concerned because the proposed, neutral rate is lower than the proposed mill levy? Is that what you're saying on capital outlay?
On capital outlay, have a mill rate of 8, but to stay revenue neutral, it requires 7.6, which is what, $101,000 higher than what revenue neutral would be on that line item specifically. But would the Board of Tax Appeals rule that that line item stands on its own, or would they rule that it does not stand on its own?
As more of like an umbrella of the overall budget.
It just makes me nervous. But if we had that buffer in the budget, if needed, and we pay, capital outlay is actually expended at the end of the fiscal year, correct? Or is it?
We budget and spend it, we collect it and then spend it. And there's a balance there. So, I mean, certainly if that would come to that. I would just say, and I'll try not to be too editorial in my comments, but if there were to be a challenge for that, there's some people that are going to be answering that on our behalf, because we follow the rules and go through the process, and they determine it revenue neutral. And it has been in the past, so I'm not saying there couldn't be a challenge, but.
Yeah, and I'm not putting that blame on you or Matt or anybody, the question is, was the directive to the district correct or incorrect? That's my concern.
And that's what I would say is.
And we just have to follow what the
Yeah,
others.
if we submit it all, we go to KSD, we go to the county, and when they say it is, we take them at their word. If there's a challenge, just like any legal challenge that we may have,
Yeah.
we would have to defend ourselves and take action. And we stand ready to do that.
Any other questions on that action? Okay, if not, I need a motion to approve the 25-26 budget. So moved. Second. Motion is second. All those in favor? 6. All those opposed? 1.
Thank you.
Next, approving the resolution to adopt the LOB budget percentage. The 33%, I think you said it's just standard, we have to do it again?
Yes, yep, we have to do it every year. We tell them at the beginning what our percent's going to be, and then we have to go through the process, and you have to approve the resolution every year. So.
Okay.
So is that, do I read somewhere that's presented in April, correct, to the KSD?
Yes, I believe it's March, April. I have to look at the date. It's on the budget calendar. Yes, we have to tell them, and that sets the maximum.
Okay, so it's presented in April and then we vote in August every year, correct? Is that how it? or
We notify KSDE in April.
Okay,
Do we have to wait till August to vote on it, or could it be in April? But I mean, for next year is my question. Is there a timeline when that needed to be done? Because I think it'd be more comfortable if we would vote to approve that before it was presented.
I mean, it's really setting the maximum, and a lot of it has to do with, depending on how you authorize your LOB, like we actually had an election, but if you didn't have an election, I gotta remember if I'm getting this correct, but I think it's, we've talked about the state average. So if you haven't had an election, by law, you can always go to the state average, which I think was like 32% last year. So that would be your maximum. So that's really the differentiation is, have you had the election or have you not? So again, just like the budget, we can always go down. So yeah, I guess technically you could approve that in April, but we're not artificially limiting ourselves by keeping it at the 33%, I guess is.
so when we turn it into the KSD, is that like, this is our intent, or is that like, this is what we're doing? Or, I mean, I'm confused how we turn it in before we vote on it. if that makes
You just
sense.
have to tell them if you're going to, what your maximum, so you could say, hey, we're only gonna do 30% next year. I mean, you can go as low as you wanna go, but again, as I walk through the revenue and the expenses, you're gonna offset that, those are operating dollars, generally speaking, because they're
Sure.
the maintenance salary in there. So, sure, you can do whatever percent you want, the question will be, how you're gonna make up that deficit.
Right, no, I was just confused on why we presented it to them in April and then didn't vote on it until August, but that makes sense.
Why? Because they require it, honestly.
Right.
But, yes, and so we've always done that, so.
I think it'd just make more sense to me if we voted on it before it was presented, but
And I don't
the
remember
voters
off
already voted on it
top of
too.
my head, the due date, so you probably need to back that up a month, but again,
Like March.
yeah. Again, I think the bigger issue is anything reduced from that. And I guess that would be the time, if you're gonna make adjustments and
Sure.
terminate things, then
I was just
you
curious
probably
as
gotta
to
give
the
people notice.
sequence.
Yeah, that's why. It's like anything, it's the maximum. Just like we have to report the final mill levies, you don't necessarily approve those, you have to tell them what the final was once we get that from the county. So, I don't know, you can get ahead to that.
It's just because of the process. I mean, KSD, which tells me it's probably hidden somewhere in the statute. We didn't used to. I mean, this didn't used to be approved like it is now.
Yeah.
Because we did have the election that made it continuous and permanent. So I don't know if somewhere along the line they're trying to streamline because not everybody took it to a vote like what we did. I can't answer that.
And that was a key point that I was gonna make is this is relatively new. We've done this for a couple of years now, but that's a different process. But again, you do always know what that is in July when you approve the preliminary mill rates, whether exceeded or not. I tell you what that's built on, so you know that, and that's just, you can never exceed that. So, I mean, if you artificially lower it. So again, that's just
I was just
at
curious.
maximum, but didn't used to have to do that. It's changed over the years and evolved, so I'm sure there's a reason why, but.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, motion, I need a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second, all those in favor? 7-0. All right, last on the agenda for action, approving the KASB annual conference delegate and alternate. Matt.
Yeah, so Kelly, do you know, when is delegate assembly this year
It's on Saturday. It's on Saturday.
of the convention?
Yeah.
So, every year, the board will appoint a delegate and an alternate, for the annual conference and specifically for the legislative, delegate assembly on some of the proposals that they're wanting to make. I know Kelly has been, a representative, the delegate, because, with her position on the KSB board, and I know that you're signed up to go. And so it could be anybody, but they usually ask for a delegate and then an alternate in case someone is unable to attend on the board.
So do we nominate them, or is it already?
Yeah, we need to
Okay.
nominate or a motion for
I'll nominate Amanda
the delegate and
for a delegate,
alternate.
since she's already signed up.
Motion and a second. Second.
Who seconded it?
Sean.
Okay.
Motion and a second, all those in favor? 7-0. Thanks. We need a motion for, an alternate.
Kelly, are you wanting? Are you
Yeah, I've already been signed up.
Okay, then
Yeah, I was,
nominate Kelly.
I'm going.
A second.
She moved.
She motioned, yeah. Motion and second, all those in favor? 7-0. Okay. Alright.
I was trying to avoid being
No,
nominated.
you're good. Alright, we need a motion to end the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
First, happy birthday, Amanda.
Thanks.
Toward the
What a way to
person's birthday,
spend it.
before I adjourn.
With all of ours, come on.
I know, yes, thank you. Alright, motion and a second, all those in favor? 7-0, alright. Thank you guys. Have a great week. Good luck to the principals.